Ex-wife vanished after the divorce. Now millionaire finds her sleeping in a shelter with his triplets. Rain slammed against the windows of the deserted office tower, each drop sounding like a promise of secrets waiting to be unearthed. Across the city, gossip swirled about the handsome millionaire, Donovan Blackwood, whose heartbreak had become the stuff of legend. But few knew the entire story, how love, betrayal, and a mysterious disappearance had shattered his world. Some had whispered that his ex-wife vanished on purpose, while others believed she had met a grim fate. Tonight, the truth waits in a dimly lit shelter, hidden among the lost and the desperate. Little does he know, this night will change everything. The sky had been clear and tranquil on the morning of Donovan Blackwood's wedding to Dalia Carter. It was held at the vintage Redwood Manor, just outside of Charleston, South Carolina, a place famed for its manicured lawns and centuries-old oak trees draped in Spanish moss. Family and friends arrived dressed to the nines, cameras flashing, laughter echoing in the halls. The bride wore a mermaid-cut satin gown that shimmered in the southern sun. The groom straightened his crisp black tuxedo 1,000 times, as if he couldn't quite believe his luck. At 27, Donovan was well on his way to becoming one of the most talked-about real estate developers in the region. His mother, Rosamond Blackwood, had once been a successful interior designer with a name that had weight in the high society circles of Charleston. His father, Martin Blackwood, had passed away when Donovan was only 10, but left behind a modest sum. Donovan turned that inheritance into the seed money for his first business venture, flipping houses in neighborhoods that most established developers overlooked. From there, he built his empire one renovation at a time. Dalia Carter, on the other hand, was the only daughter of the esteemed Carter family. They were known for producing philanthropic leaders. Her mother worked for the Red Cross for decades, and her father oversaw a scholarship foundation for underprivileged youths. Dalia herself was an emerging event planner, the sort of person who brought magic to every gathering she organized. With her luminous smile and a heart rumored to be kinder than a saint's, she could melt the hardest cynic. She was the kind of woman who seemed destined for a fairy tale life. In truth, Donovan was instantly smitten the first time he saw Dalia at one of her charity events. She wore a simple pastel dress and no jewelry other than a single pearl necklace. Despite the sea of elegantly dressed men and women, she moved as if she floated above them, calm, graceful, almost regal. When he introduced himself, Dalia seemed genuinely interested, not in his business success or the lavish gifts he could afford, but in his heart. Her sincerity captured him in a way no one else ever had. That night, they danced to a jazz trio playing in a corner of the ballroom. It was a dance that ignited a whirlwind romance. Their wedding was the talk of the season. Magazines covered every detail: the glowing bride, the teary-eyed groom, the decadent 5-tiered cake topped with spun sugar flowers. Newspapers sang praises for the philanthropic alliances that their families had forged. The local news even ran a brief segment on their union, describing it as a match destined to uplift the community in more ways than one. For the first 2 years, their marriage was as idyllic as any romance novel might describe. They traveled from the turquoise beaches of Bali to the cobblestone streets of Florence. Dalia was enthralled by new cultures and took endless photographs, dreaming up ways to fuse exotic inspirations into her event-planning business back home. Donovan, ever the entrepreneur, took mental notes on architecture, property values, and potential new markets overseas. They grew together, supporting one another's dreams. Then came an unexpected pregnancy. A surprise, yes, but a delightful one multiplied by 3. Dalia almost fainted when the doctor calmly announced that they would be having triplets. Donovan felt a thrilling wave of excitement and panic all at once. Could they handle this? Could they raise 3 children and still manage their bustling careers? They were about to find out. Their families were ecstatic, especially Dalia's mother, Rachel Carter, who dreamed of sweet baby giggles filling the Carter mansion. Pregnancy and childbirth introduced new complexities. The final months of Dalia's pregnancy forced her into bed rest. She missed the hustle of her event planning gigs and sank into bouts of anxiety. Donovan's time was increasingly consumed by property deals in Florida and Georgia, so he wasn't always by her side to provide solace. Stress seeped through the cracks of their once happy union. Business soared for Donovan, requiring constant travel. Dalia struggled with the demands of 3 newborns, each requiring a unique combination of feedings, diapers, and lullabies at all hours. Hired nannies and postpartum nurses brought some relief, but Dalia felt a kind of loneliness no staff member could mend. By the time the triplets, Amelia, Samuel, and Phoebe, turned 1, tension in the Blackwood household was palpable. Donovan spent more nights in his condo near his Atlanta development site, citing urgent work. Dalia, feeling isolated and exhausted, spent hours on the phone with her close friend, Jessica Brown, sobbing that she was losing the man she loved. Arguments erupted whenever Donovan returned home. Small concerns about diaper brands or feeding schedules escalated into vicious fights about neglected responsibilities and emotional distance. Distrust took root. What started as the perfect marriage devolved into suspicion and blame. Dalia believed Donovan cared more about his empire than his family. Donovan felt Dalia didn't appreciate the sacrifices he made to secure their financial future. Pressure from both families to work it out only worsened the situation. By the time the triplets turned 2, the once vaunted power couple filed for divorce. The tabloids had a field day. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some claimed Donovan had strayed, that he kept a mistress in Atlanta. Others insisted Dalia was secretly battling postpartum depression, so severe she had run away from home. The real reason remained hidden, perhaps buried under layers of heartbreak and disappointment that the outside world could never fully grasp. They settled the divorce swiftly, with the public watching every move. Dalia insisted on minimal publicity. Donovan agreed to keep it quiet. The judge granted Donovan generous visitation rights but awarded primary custody to Dalia, with a substantial monthly support check guaranteed to provide for the children's every need. Yet, within a few months of the divorce finalizing, Dalia vanished completely. No phone calls, no letters, no friendly updates to mutual acquaintances, nothing. She didn't even appear to collect her monthly support checks. She left the children in the care of Dalia's mother, Rachel Carter, and slipped away like a ghost in the night. Donovan was furious and terrified all at once. Where had she gone? Did she abandon her children? Rachel Carter tried to keep calm, insisting that Dalia might be dealing with personal demons, but even she had no clue where her daughter had disappeared. Weeks turned to months. Then, about a year after Dalia's disappearance, the triplets were placed in Donovan's custody because Rachel had been diagnosed with advanced leukemia. She could no longer care for them without additional help, and Donovan stepped in. He hired a small army of staff nannies, tutors, and child psychologists to help the children cope with the abrupt absence of their mother and grandmother's illness. Yet, Dalia remained missing. Donovan filed missing person reports and hired private investigators. Jessica Brown, Dalia's old friend, was relentless in her search. She posted pictures on social media, reached out to every contact Dalia might have had. Nothing. The story became a local obsession, but eventually, as the headlines died down, people moved on to fresher gossip. 3 years passed. Donovan's empire grew bigger. He acquired properties along the East Coast, sealed partnerships with international investors, and grew into a bona fide mogul. Yet, Behind the polished suits and chauffeur-driven cars was a single father, exhausted by heartbreak. He tucked his children in each night, telling them stories about how their mother was on a special adventure but would come home soon. He wasn't sure he believed it himself. The triplets, each bearing a hint of Dalia's features, grew into vibrant preschoolers. Amelia was quiet and thoughtful, with big, curious eyes. Samuel was fearless and athletic, bounding around the house. Phoebe was the sensitive one, quick to tears if she sensed tension in the room. They asked about their mother often. Sometimes Donovan froze, uncertain what to say. He had run out of plausible excuses. One particularly rainy evening, as thunder rattled the windows of his lavish mansion, Donovan stared at a portrait Dalia had commissioned before their divorce. The painting captured a radiant moment on their wedding day. Her smile seemed to mock him now. He felt he'd do anything just to have some closure, to know if Dalia was still alive, to know if she had truly chosen to abandon them, or if something more sinister had occurred. That night, he made a solemn vow to never stop looking for her. That vow finally led him to a tip from a private investigator named Christopher Watson. Christopher had once served in the FBI, known to be relentless in his pursuit of truth. He was the man you called when you wanted no stone left unturned. He told Donovan he might have found someone matching Dalia's description in a women's shelter in Philadelphia. It was a shaky lead at best. Philadelphia was hundreds of miles from Charleston, and the trail was already cold. But Donovan had traveled farther on rumors, half as promising. He left the children in the care of their trusted nanny, Ebony Fields, and hopped on his private jet. The entire flight, he wrestled with questions that churned his stomach. What if Dalia refused to see him? What if she was mentally unwell? What if she had run because of guilt or fear and found a new life she didn't want him to disrupt? Upon arriving in Philadelphia, the investigator led him to an aging brick building in a run-down neighborhood. Faded graffiti covered the walls of abandoned storefronts. Trash littered the sidewalks. Donovan's expensive Italian leather shoes clacked uncomfortably on the cracked pavement. They reached the shelter, a small, somber place with just a few flickering overhead lights. A volunteer at the reception area, Stephanie Martin, recognized Christopher. She glanced sympathetically at Donovan, but said she wasn't sure if Dalia was there. The occupant he described had left for the day. Donovan's heart sank. Another dead end, he feared. Still, Christopher suggested they stay nearby. Maybe the woman in question would return. They loitered in the shelter's lobby for hours, Donovan's mind swirling with possibilities. Could Dalia be in such dire straits that she needed to rely on a shelter? It was almost unthinkable. He had been sending monthly support checks that remained untouched. She could have lived anywhere, done anything with that money. Why would she choose this? That evening, a petite figure in an oversized hoodie slipped through the shelter's glass doors. Her head was bowed, hair tangled, posture timid. But Donovan recognized her in an instant. The gentle slope of her shoulders, the curve of her jaw. It was Dalia. She looked up, saw him, and froze. Her eyes widened in shock, and then she spun around as if to run. Donovan called her name, his voice echoing in the cramped space. She paused for what felt like an eternity. Slowly, painfully, she turned back toward him. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, time telescoped. He saw in her face a woman haunted by secrets, battered by life, and burdened by an overwhelming guilt. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she stood rooted to the spot, as if she couldn't move any closer or farther. No words could capture the intensity of the moment. After more than 3 years of absence, there they were, once husband and wife, now strangers. Donovan finally found the voice to whisper, "Dalia." Why? Her lips trembled. She wanted to speak, but no sound emerged. The tension in the air felt like a storm about to break. In the background, the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional murmur of other shelter residents seemed to fade, leaving just the two of them in that charged silence. Donovan spent the next hour trying to persuade Dalia to leave the shelter with him. She refused. Her eyes darted around, fearful of the attention they were drawing. Volunteers like Stephanie Martin and local resident Mark Phillips hovered at a respectful distance. Christopher Watson discreetly excused himself to give them privacy. Finally, Dalia agreed to speak with Donovan, but only outside. She led him through a side door into a small, fenced-in courtyard behind the shelter. The night air felt cold. A single flickering bulb cast shadows on the graffiti-stained walls. "What happened?" Donovan asked, barely able to control the quiver in his voice. "Where have you been?" Dalia pressed her back against the wall as though she needed its support. "I couldn't stay," she whispered, eyes downcast. "I'm sorry. I know it makes no sense. I've probably hurt everyone, including the kids." Her voice broke. "The kids," Donovan repeated, pain creeping into his tone. "They ask about you every day. They're with me now. Your mother, she's ill." Dalia's eyes flooded with tears. "Mama's sick? How bad?" "Bad," Donovan replied softly. "She's been battling leukemia. She couldn't take care of the triplets alone anymore." Dalia's face crumpled. "I never wanted to abandon them. But after our divorce, I couldn't handle it all. The guilt, the anger. I felt like if I stayed, I'd drown." He studied her face, seeing the ravages of the last few years etched into her features. Dark circles under her eyes, hollow cheeks, trembling lips. "Dalia," he said, voice almost pleading, "let me help you. We have resources. If you need therapy, if you need—" She shook her head vigorously. "You don't understand. I got into something dangerous." She stared at the ground, tears dropping onto her worn sneakers. "I borrowed money from people I shouldn't have. By the time I realized the interest rates, the hidden fees, it was too late. They started threatening to hurt our family. I didn't want them to use the children as leverage. I left to protect them." Donovan's heart lurched. "Who threatened you? Why didn't you come to me?" "I have lawyers, connections. We could have handled it together." She gave a bitter laugh. "At that point, you and I were at each other's throats. I was convinced you hated me, that you'd see me as just another burden. It was easier to go away, to try to fix it myself, but everything spiraled." She took a shaky breath. "I've been drifting. This shelter has been my home for the past 6 months. The idea that Dalia had been living in squalor, haunted by threats, tore Donovan apart. He wanted to hold her, to drive her straight to a hospital or to a safe place, but she flinched away from his touch, still wary, still harboring old wounds. Quietly, they made a plan for him to return to see her the next day, to take her out to dinner somewhere discreet so they could talk more. He slipped a bundle of cash into her hoodie pocket, but she tried to refuse it. "Just until tomorrow," he insisted. Reluctantly, Dalia nodded. She avoided his gaze as she slid back inside the shelter, leaving Donovan standing alone in the dim courtyard with more questions than answers. Donovan returned to his suite at the city's luxurious Ritz-Carlton, but he barely slept. The next morning, he updated Christopher Watson and set up a security detail to keep watch on Dalia, worried that her alleged debt collectors might resurface. But when he arrived at the shelter at midday, Dalia was gone. Nobody had seen her leave. Nobody knew where she might be. Panic set in. Had she run away again? Or had something happened to her? He waited in the shelter's lobby for hours, calling her old cell phone, which was, of course, disconnected. Late in the afternoon, she finally arrived, looking haggard. Donovan jumped to his feet. "Where were you?" he demanded. "I was worried sick," she glowered. "I'm not your wife anymore, Donovan. I had something to take care of." The ice in her tone told him to back off. he exhaled, trying to remain calm, reminding himself that they both had years of pain and misunderstanding to process. "Could we just talk?" he asked, swallowing his frustration. Reluctantly, Dalia agreed. They took a cab to a quiet diner on the outskirts of town, an old 1950s relic with vinyl booths and neon signs. Over cups of steaming coffee, Dalia confessed more details. She had wanted to start her own event planning company after the divorce, but she lacked capital. In a desperate attempt to compete with bigger agencies, she borrowed money from a predatory lender, a small group rumored to be tied to criminal elements. When she defaulted on the loan, the threats began. She paid them off by draining her personal savings. She contemplated using the child support checks, but felt ashamed and guilty, believing Donovan would discover her plan and use it against her. So she disappeared, assuming they would leave her children and family alone if she was the only target in sight. But once her resources dried up, she ended up homeless and shuffling between shelters. Donovan reached across the table, gently taking her hand. This time, she let him. "I'm so sorry," he murmured. "I wish you had told me. Even if we were angry at each other, I would have helped you. Our kids need their mother." Tears trembled on the edge of her eyelids. "How are they?" she asked softly. "They're big," he said with a faint smile. "Amelia loves reading. Samuel's into soccer now. Phoebe is an artist, drawing on every scrap of paper she can find. They miss you." He paused. "And Rachel needs you too." Dalia let out a shaky breath. "I need to see them, but I'm not sure they'll forgive me. They're children," Donovan said softly. "They'll just be happy you're back." Still, Dalia appeared conflicted. Beneath her relief was a deep-seated fear. "Those people who threatened me, I'm not entirely convinced they're gone." "Let me handle that," Donovan insisted. "I have lawyers, I have investigators, we can ensure you're safe." She nodded, though anxiety still shadowed her eyes. They left the diner hand in hand, uncertain what the future held, but united by a shared responsibility that transcended their acrimonious past. Convincing Dalia to return to Charleston took some doing. She insisted on traveling alone by bus, uncomfortable accepting Donovan's lavish suggestions of a private jet. He wanted to protect her, but also realized he had to respect her boundaries. Christopher Watson arranged discreet security to trail her without her knowledge, ensuring no foul play would befall her along the way. Back home, Donovan prepared the children as best as he could. He tried not to raise their hopes too high, fearing Dalia might back out at the last second. On the day Dalia was expected to arrive, Ebony Fields, the children's ever-reliable nanny, helped them tidy the living room. Donovan paced by the front window, heart hammering in his chest. When Dalia finally stepped out of a taxi onto the circular driveway, Donovan opened the front door but hung back, letting the children see her first. Amelia, Samuel, and Phoebe raced outside. Screaming "Mommy!" they collided into her legs, nearly toppling her over. She knelt down, hugging them fiercely, tears staining her cheeks as she peppered them with kisses and apologies. The triplets cried, almost in disbelief that their mother had returned. Donovan stood in the doorway, his own eyes misty with emotion. He had envisioned this moment 1,000 times, but seeing it in reality was overwhelming. Inside, Dalia shakily took in the surroundings. The house had changed. Different furniture, new paint. Pictures of the children adorned the walls, birthday parties, holiday snapshots, day trips to the zoo, evidence of the life that had continued in her absence. At first, the children clung to her like glue, each vying for her attention, showing her their drawings and toys. But as the minutes passed, curiosity overshadowed the tension, and they chattered happily to fill her in on everything she'd missed. Ebony quietly left them to their moment, smiling as she slipped into the kitchen. Donovan hovered nearby, watching Dalia's every reaction. He longed to ask a million questions, but for now, the children took center stage. Later, Dalia stared at a photo pinned to the refrigerator, the triplets wearing matching dinosaur pajamas, Ebony in the background holding a tray of cupcakes. Dalia traced the image, guilt etched on her face. "You've taken good care of them," she said, barely audible. Donovan swallowed. "I did my best, but I'm not you." A heavy silence fell between them. In the distance, the children's laughter echoed from the family room. For a moment, it seemed as if they had slipped back in time, but the weight of everything that had transpired lingered like a ghost in the halls. At first, Dalia was adamant that she wouldn't stay in the mansion. "I need to find a place of my own," she insisted. Donovan wanted her to remain close so they could collectively handle the children and deal with her debt issues. Dalia was reluctant, but the triplets begged her to stay. Eventually, Donovan suggested she stay at least until she had a plan in place. She agreed, but only temporarily. Their initial interactions were awkward. Donovan tried to extend small kindnesses, like preparing Dalia's favorite herbal tea or making sure she had fresh towels in the guest suite. She was polite but distant, suspicious that he expected something in return or that their old arguments might flare up. Late at night, they would both find themselves in the kitchen, rummaging for a midnight snack and exchange stilted small talk. Meanwhile, Christopher Watson made swift progress, investigating Dalia's predatory lenders. After some digging, he discovered they had since been arrested in a federal sting operation. There was no longer an active threat. Realizing Dalia was safe now was a burden off everyone's shoulders, but it triggered a wave of conflicting emotions in Dalia. Had she destroyed her marriage and hurt her children in a misguided attempt to protect them? About a week later, Dalia was alone in the garden, gazing at the hydrangeas she had once lovingly planted. Donovan approached quietly. "Beautiful day," he commented. She nodded, arms wrapped around herself. "I used to think my life would always be as perfect as this garden," she mused, voice tinged with sadness. "Then one mistake tore it all apart." He hesitated, then replied gently, "We both made mistakes." She looked at him, tears welling. "I missed so many moments with them. First words, first steps. I feel like a stranger in my own family." Donovan hesitated, then stepped closer. "You can't change the past, but you can be here now." He paused. "Will you?" It was a simple question, but it carried a heavy promise. Dalia bit her lip, eyes brimming. She nodded slowly. "Yes, I want to try." As Dalia settled in, more layers of her life during those 3 missing years began to emerge. Late one night, she confided in Ebony, who had become a maternal figure to the triplets and, in some ways, to Dalia as well. "I was terrified every day," Dalia admitted, hugging a mug of cocoa. "I moved from motel to motel, city to city, always looking over my shoulder." Ebony listened quietly, occasionally placing a comforting hand on Dalia's shoulder. "You've been through a lot," she said softly. "But you're here now, and that's what matters." Dalia nodded, tears catching the warm glow of the kitchen lights. She had lived with guilt for so long that the concept of forgiveness felt foreign. Even as mother and children reconnected, Donovan tried to maintain boundaries. He was no saint. The bitterness from their divorce still lingered. He remembered nights when he cried out of frustration, feeling abandoned and betrayed by the woman he loved. He was also protective of his heart, not sure if Dalia's presence would be permanent or if she might vanish again. Yet, an undeniable connection lingered between them. Old habits like how she laughed at his corny jokes or the way their eyes met across the dinner table rekindled sparks of their former love. On nights when the children were in bed, they sometimes found themselves sharing a glass of wine in the living room, talking about old memories. Laughter would bubble up, only to be replaced by awkward silence, as they both recalled how abruptly it had all ended. While Dalia's return remained hush-hush, rumors began circulating. Neighbors, especially those in Charleston's elite circles, gossiped about the reappearance of Donovan Blackwood's ex-wife. Talk grew louder when Dalia was spotted picking up the children from their private school, looking thin and dressed in ill-fitting clothes. People whispered about drug use, mental breakdowns, and everything in between. Donovan tried to shield Dalia from the rumor mill, but it was nearly impossible. One person who refused to be silent was Dalia's close friend, Jessica Brown. The moment Jessica heard Dalia was back, she rushed to Donovan's mansion. The two women embraced, crying in the foyer. Jessica wasted no time chastising Dalia for not reaching out sooner, but her scolding quickly turned to comforting reassurance. Jessica vowed to help Dalia navigate this new chapter. She promised to handle any media inquiries that might surface, hoping to protect Dalia's fragile state. But there was another concern. Dalia's mother, Rachel Carter. The leukemia had progressed, leaving her weak and hospitalized. Dalia hadn't visited her yet, terrified of facing her mother's disappointment and heartbreak. Jessica accompanied Dalia to the hospital, where Rachel lay in a private room, her once vibrant complexion now pale and fragile. When Dalia entered, Rachel's eyes widened with shock and relief. "My baby," Rachel murmured, tears sliding down her cheeks. "You're back." Dalia clung to her mother's hand, sobbing apologies. Rachel, though frail, pulled Dalia close. "I forgive you," she whispered, voice shaking with emotion. "We'll figure it out, together." Days turned into weeks. Dalia found herself gradually stepping back into a maternal role. She helped the children with homework, packed their lunches, and read them bedtime stories. The triplets, elated to have their mother again, forgave her with the boundless compassion only children seem to possess. Yet Dalia still wrestled with her own demons. Every night she replayed the last few years in her head, tortured by regrets. Donovan noticed a change in her, though. She was more thoughtful, more humble. The Dalia who had left years ago had been consumed by resentment and desperation. The Dalia returning now was scarred by hardship and determined to make amends. She started paying attention to Donovan's hectic work schedule, offering to handle certain family obligations so he could focus on pressing deadlines. She even suggested collaborating on a charity event to benefit families struggling with homelessness, drawing on her own experiences. But old wounds do not vanish overnight. One afternoon, Dalia stumbled upon Donovan's text messages to a woman named Veronica, a potential business partner from Miami. The messages were innocent, strictly about project timelines and budget projections, but Dalia's old insecurities flared. She confronted Donovan, eyes blazing with jealousy. He bristled, stung by her lack of trust. "You disappeared for 3 years," he snapped. "You don't get to question my loyalty now." Her face crumpled. She fled to her room, tears in her eyes. Donovan immediately regretted his harshness. But the fight reminded both of them how tenuous their fragile peace was. Just as life began to settle into a new normal, Dalia received a letter in the mail. It was handwritten, no return address, and contained a single ominous line: "You owe us, don't think we've forgotten." Dalia's face turned white as she read it. She rushed to Donovan, clutching the note, his jaw clenched. "I thought those people were taken down," he said, anger boiling in his voice. He immediately called Christopher Watson, who sprang into action. Meanwhile, Donovan increased security around the house, especially with the children in mind. Cameras were installed at every entrance, and Ebony was instructed to never let the triplets out of sight without a guard present. Dalia trembled with renewed fear. She began sleeping with the lights on and refused to let the children out of her sight. Any suspicious car driving by the mansion triggered her panic. Donovan comforted her as best he could, but the tension in the household mounted. A second letter arrived a week later stating, "Time is running out. No signature, no clues." Christopher Watson's thorough investigation revealed that not all members of the predatory lending ring were arrested. A few low-level enforcers might still be at large, possibly looking for payback. Dalia felt the walls closing in again. Had she dragged her family into another dangerous situation? One stormy night, someone threw a rock through the mansion's front window, shattering glass all over the foyer. By the time security rushed outside, the perpetrator was gone. Dalia screamed, gathering the children close. Donovan dialed 911, his hands shaking with rage and fear. This was an escalation, a deliberate threat at their own doorstep. To everyone's surprise, an unlikely ally emerged in the form of Vito Moretti, a high-profile attorney from New York known for his connections. He was an acquaintance of Donovan's through business circles, rumored to have some influence in less savory networks. When he heard about Dalia's predicament, he visited Charleston to meet with them. Vito explained that the group threatening Dalia might respond to a different kind of negotiation, one that involved leaning on underworld codes of respect and fear, rather than legal avenues. Dalia recoiled at the idea, afraid they were only stepping deeper into a dangerous world. Donovan, however, felt trapped. He wanted to protect his children and end this menace once and for all. After much deliberation, they agreed to let Vito attempt a negotiation behind the scenes. In the meantime, Christopher Watson worked with local law enforcement, building a case to arrest anyone who attempted to extort Dalia or harm the Blackwoods. Days of excruciating waiting followed. More letters arrived, each more threatening than the last. One demanded a lump sum of money, enough to buy a lavish property outright. Donovan was prepared to pay it just to stop the harassment, but Christopher insisted they use this as bait to catch the culprits. The plan was risky: set up a handoff at an abandoned parking lot under police surveillance. Dalia insisted on being there, claiming the criminals wouldn't believe it otherwise. On the chosen night, Dalia stood trembling in the deserted lot, a duffel bag supposedly filled with money at her feet. Police officers hid behind nearby buildings, weapons at the ready. Donovan waited anxiously in a distant black SUV, fear coursing through his veins. A dark sedan approached, headlights off, stopping a few yards away. Two men stepped out, faces obscured by hoodies. Dalia recognized one from her darkest days. He had collected payments from her more than once. A small video camera pinned to Dalia's jacket transmitted the entire encounter to the police. The men demanded the bag, cursing Dalia for disappearing years ago. She stammered an apology, explaining she just wanted to end it. As one man reached out for the duffel, police lights blazed, sirens blaring. Officers surrounded them with guns drawn, shouting commands. The criminals tried to flee, but it was futile. Within minutes, they were cuffed, wrestled to the ground, and read their rights. Dalia collapsed in relief. Donovan rushed to her side, wrapping his arms around her. She sobbed against his chest, years of fear pouring out. "It's over," he whispered, trying to calm her. "It's finally over." In the wake of the arrests, a sense of relief permeated the Blackwood household. Dalia slept peacefully for the first time in years. The triplets sensed the lighter mood and resumed their carefree chatter, no longer worried about grown-up shadows hanging over them. Donovan cancelled a string of business meetings just to spend more time at home, read bedtime stories, and help Dalia through her emotional healing. She was still fragile, prone to panic attacks and night terrors, but day by day she grew stronger. With her immediate debts resolved and the threat neutralized, Dalia faced a new question: what next? She had no income, no career prospects. Donovan, for his part, wanted to support her, but she was fiercely determined to stand on her own feet. Jessica Brown stepped in, offering Dalia a part-time job at her own event planning company in Charleston. Dalia initially balked, feeling unworthy after all she had done. But Jessica refused to take no for an answer. "You have talents the world needs," Jessica insisted. "Your eye for detail, your creativity, you can't hide from that forever." Eventually, Dalia agreed. Balancing motherhood and a budding career was a challenge, but this time, She wasn't alone. Donovan and Ebony took over childcare duties whenever Dalia had an event to coordinate. Weeks turned into months, and Dalia's confidence began to bloom again. She found solace in creating memorable celebrations for others. It became a form of therapy, turning sorrow into beauty. Rachel Carter's health fluctuated, but the doctors found a promising treatment protocol. Dalia spent her weekends at her mother's bedside, making up for lost time. Rachel's spirit seemed to flourish at the sight of her daughter's renewed optimism and the triplets' unstoppable energy. As the seasons changed, so did the dynamic between Dalia and Donovan. Cautiously, they navigated conversations about their past, acknowledging the mistakes on both sides. They attended a few joint therapy sessions, at first for the sake of the children, but soon realized how much they each needed to address their unresolved pain. Therapy sessions were often fraught with tears and anger, but also breakthroughs. Donovan admitted he had been too consumed by work, oblivious to Dalia's emotional turmoil. Dalia confessed she never communicated her desperation honestly, allowing resentment to fester and push her toward disastrous decisions. Slowly, they learned to trust each other again. They discovered how to share responsibilities without letting ego or guilt overshadow their teamwork. One evening, after the children had gone to bed, Dalia and Donovan found themselves alone in the backyard garden, the moon lighting up the hydrangeas. Dalia was wearing a simple sundress, far removed from the designer gowns she once preferred. Donovan wore jeans and a button-down, a relaxed look for a once intimidating businessman. They were discussing the triplets' upcoming birthday party when Dalia suddenly fell silent. "What is it?" Donovan asked. She took a deep breath. "I was wondering if we're doing okay. If we're heading somewhere good or just living in the past." He studied her face. "I think we've created something new," he said softly. "It's not the same as before, but maybe that's good." Dalia nodded, tears glistening. In that moment, Donovan leaned in and gently kissed her forehead. It wasn't a passionate declaration of love. It was more like a vow of honesty, a promise to try again. Their path forward wasn't linear. A few weeks later, a heated argument erupted over Dalia's use of Donovan's credit card to buy a new wardrobe for herself and the children. She insisted it was only because the triplets had outgrown their clothes and she had no budget of her own. He felt blindsided by the expense. Old wounds about money and control flared up. For a tense 48 hours, Dalia considered moving into a small apartment Jessica had offered her. The children, sensing the friction, became anxious. Eventually, they realized they had to communicate better about finances. Dalia was neither a broke runaway nor a teenage daughter. Donovan was not just a wallet. They established a joint account specifically for the children's expenses, with transparent spending records to avoid misunderstandings. It was a small but significant step toward building a healthier relationship. Word of Dalia's return spread further than Charleston. Media outlets had largely ignored her disappearance, but now the rumor of her re-emergence circulated again. A local newspaper tried to run a sensational piece titled "Dalia Carter's Triumphant Return from Shelters to a Millionaire's Mansion," complete with speculation about mob threats and Donovan's role as a knight in shining armor. Jessica and Donovan's legal team intervened, ensuring the piece never went to print. They wanted to protect Dalia's privacy and the children's well-being. Some social circles, especially those who had once snubbed Dalia, offered awkward olive branches, inviting her to charity galas. Dalia felt conflicted. She wanted to rebuild her life, but not with superficial friendships. She found greater fulfillment connecting with local shelters, sharing her experiences with women at risk. She donated her time, organizing small fundraising events to collect clothes and resources for those in need. Donovan quietly supported these endeavors, writing sizable checks whenever necessary, but never overshadowing Dalia's personal commitment. One poignant moment of healing came when Dalia organized a family day at Redwood Manor, the same venue where she and Donovan had married years ago. She reserved the manor's gardens, inviting close friends, family, and staff who had supported them through the tumult. There were no elaborate decorations, just a cozy setup with balloons for the children, simple floral arrangements, and a barbecue. Rachel Carter, in a wheelchair now, attended with the help of a nurse, smiling radiantly at every mention of progress in Dalia's new life. Jessica Brown arrived with her longtime partner, Benjamin, beaming with pride at Dalia's transformation. During the event, Dalia took the microphone, nerves trembling in her voice. She thanked everyone for their understanding and help. Then she singled out Donovan, holding back tears. "Thank you for never giving up on me, even when I'd given up on myself," she said. The crowd cheered. Some teary-eyed, Donovan quietly walked over and gave Dalia a small embrace, mindful of their delicate status. Over time, Dalia found a rhythm, balancing part-time event planning, caring for the triplets, and addressing her lingering traumas in therapy. Donovan continued to grow his real estate empire, but he made sure to schedule family time, a habit he had once neglected. The children flourished, each expressing their unique personalities and talents. By the triplets' 5th birthday, Dalia and Donovan found themselves genuinely enjoying each other's company. They still slept in separate bedrooms. Moving too fast could rekindle old tensions, but there was an undercurrent of affection they could no longer ignore. Even Ebony smirked knowingly whenever they bantered playfully. Jessica Brown, ever the meddling friend, gently nudged Dalia about the possibility of reconciliation. Dalia simply smiled, saying she was taking things one day at a time. One late autumn evening, Dalia finished tucking the triplets into bed. She wandered into Donovan's study where he was working on his laptop, reviewing property contracts. She tapped gently on the doorframe. "Hey," he said, looking up. "All quiet upstairs?" She nodded, stepping in. The warmth from the fireplace flickered across the wooden shelves, casting dancing shadows on rows of business books and family photographs. "Donovan," she began, voice trembling slightly, "I want to tell you something." He closed his laptop. "I'm listening." She paused, as if gathering courage. "I need you to know how sorry I am, truly, for everything. Not just disappearing, but for the fights before that, for blaming you for things I couldn't handle. Her voice cracked. "I was so consumed by my own pain that I forgot how to communicate, how to trust. And the kids," she couldn't finish the sentence. Donovan rose, crossing the room in a few strides. He enveloped her in a comforting embrace. She pressed her face into his shoulder, tears staining his shirt. He stroked her hair. "I'm sorry too," he murmured. "I should have been more present, more empathetic. I pushed you away without realizing it." They stood there, holding each other, a sense of bittersweet longing filling the room. For a fleeting moment, it was as if the last few years never happened. All that existed was the love they once shared and the promise that it could be salvaged. As winter approached, Dalia's event planning business with Jessica gained momentum. Word spread of Dalia's remarkable flair for bringing warmth and creativity to intimate gatherings, and soon they had more clients than they could handle. Donovan, for his part, was in the middle of sealing a major deal for a waterfront development in Miami. Life hummed with productivity and possibility. One December evening, the family set out to a holiday fundraiser at the Charleston Children's Hospital, a cause Dalia felt strongly about. She had helped organize the event's decor, decking the hospital lobby with twinkling lights, garlands, and a massive tree covered in handcrafted ornaments made by young patients. Donning a simple but elegant red dress, Dalia guided the triplets through the crowd, distributing small gifts to patients and staff. Donovan lingered by her side, watching how she interacted with the children, her face lit with compassion. In that moment, he felt a rush of admiration and gratitude. Here before him was the mother of his children, who had traveled to hell and back and come out stronger. Toward the end of the night, the triplets dragged their parents to a cozy corner where a volunteer was playing Christmas carols on a piano. They listened for a while, then Donovan quietly excused himself, whispering something to Jessica. She gave him a wide-eyed nod and scurried off. Moments later, the music stopped. Jessica tapped the microphone, clearing her throat. "We have a special announcement," she declared. "Donovan Blackwood, would you like to come up?" Dalia looked on, puzzled. Donovan approached the piano, reached into his pocket, and turned to face Dalia, who remained standing a few paces away. The crowd, sensing something monumental, quieted to a hush. Dalia's heart pounded as Donovan slowly lowered himself onto one knee. "Dalia Carter," he said, voice unsteady. "We've had more ups and downs than I ever thought possible. But through it all, I never stopped loving you. We may be divorced in the eyes of the law, but in my heart, you're still the woman I want to spend my life with. Will you marry me again?" Dalia stood rooted in shock. The triplets squealed in excitement. She realized her cheeks were wet with tears. After what felt like forever, she found her voice. "Yes," she whispered. Then louder, "Yes!" Applause and cheers erupted as Donovan slipped a simple, elegant ring onto her finger. It wasn't as flashy as her first engagement ring, but it held infinitely more meaning. They embraced, tears and laughter mingling. In the background, the piano resumed playing a gentle carol. For a moment, it felt as though every trial they had endured led to this triumphant second chance. They decided on a small, private wedding. No tabloids, no high society spectacle, just the people who mattered most. The triplets, Rachel Carter, now in remission after successful treatments, Jessica Brown, Ebony Fields, and a handful of close friends. They chose Redwood Manor again, not for the grandeur, but for the memories and the sense of coming full circle. On a crisp spring morning, Dalia stood once more in a bridal suite at Redwood Manor. This time, her dress was simpler, flowing chiffon with delicate lace detailing at the sleeves. She gazed at her reflection in the mirror, heart hammering in her chest, but brimming with hope. In the distance, she could hear the triplets giggling and occasionally bickering as Ebony tried to keep them still. Jessica flitted around, ensuring everything was in place. As the ceremony began in the manor's garden, Donovan stood at the altar, wearing a tailored suit. He locked eyes with Dalia, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. This wasn't the naive excitement of their first wedding. It was a mature determination born from pain and growth. When Dalia reached him, they held hands, the triplets standing by with wide grins, each holding small bouquets. The officiant spoke softly, acknowledging the journey that had led them here. Dalia and Donovan exchanged vows with heartfelt sincerity. "I promise to communicate, to stand by you in dark times, and to work at love every single day," Dalia said, tears threatening to fall. Donovan's voice quivered with emotion. "I promise to share burdens, to give you the space to grow, and to never let misunderstandings fester again." With the final pronouncement, they sealed their vows with a gentle kiss. Applause rang out in the small gathering. The triplets whooped with delight, hugging their parents. Months later, Dalia and Donovan found an equilibrium most couples only dream of. Life was not perfect. Arguments flared over missed appointments or business stress, and tears were still shed when old traumas resurfaced. But they tackled these challenges with empathy, guided by a love that had been tested and refined. Dalia's event planning business thrived, earning a reputation for heartfelt touches. Donovan's real estate empire expanded internationally, but he made a point to spend weekends at home, coaching Samuel's soccer practices or painting with Phoebe. Amelia often sat with Dalia in the library, absorbed in books, occasionally giving her mother an idea or two for upcoming events. Every so often, Dalia volunteered at the very shelter in Philadelphia where Donovan had found her that fateful day. She'd organize mini celebrations for the women and children there, bringing them a spark of hope. Donovan supported her charitable endeavors financially, but more importantly, he supported her emotionally. He understood that Dalia's empathy for the homeless wasn't just philanthropy, it was a deep bond forged through her own experiences. Rachel Carter, with her health stabilized, relished every chance to spend time with her grandchildren, sometimes scolding Dalia for letting them stay up past their bedtime. Jessica Brown remained a steadfast friend and business partner, joking that she had front-row tickets to the best telenovela in town, but with a deeply fulfilling, happy ending. In quiet moments, Dalia and Donovan would reflect on how far they had come. They had lost each other once, drowning in miscommunication and fear. Fate had given them a second chance, messy, complicated, and profoundly human. Neither pretended life would now be easy, but they had learned the most valuable lesson of all. True love isn't just about the grand gestures or the fairy tale weddings. It's about standing by each other in the worst of times, being willing to forgive the unforgivable, and forging a new story from the ashes of the old. And that, perhaps, was the happiest ending anyone could ask for. Our story may have started with heartbreak, secrets, and tragedy, but it proves how second chances can bloom from the darkest places. The journey of Dalia and Donovan is a testament to love's ability to heal when both hearts are willing to forgive. It wasn't an easy path. They faced looming threats, crippling guilt, and their own shortcomings. Yet, through perseverance, open communication, and a willingness to confront the past, they discovered that even the deepest wounds can mend. If you found this real-life drama both gripping and inspiring, please show your support by hitting that like button, subscribing to our channel, and sharing this story with friends who might need a reminder that hope can prevail, even in life's toughest trials. Let's continue to celebrate stories of triumph against all odds, because the next chapter of hope might be just around the corner.